less than 1 month after being released as open source, I used the little bunny ear quotation marks for those of you listening to the audio version, the Winamp MP3 player, the source code for it has mysteriously vanished from GitHub. Just poof, it's gone, bye-bye. For those of you watching the video version, this is the current screenshot of the Winamp GitHub repository. Let's bring everyone up to speed in case you missed this the first time around. Okay, the short version. So back on, what was this, September 29th? I think it was September 29th. Yes, September 25th. September 25th, Winamp was released as open source, but it was weird. It was a really weird release. Yes, they published the source code up to GitHub. It was available for everyone to look at. That was very cool. That was very cool from a software archaeology perspective, right? We could dig through the source code of Winamp. How neat is that? However, the license that they licensed the source code under was bizarre, to say the least. They called it the Winamp Collaborative License, and it specifically forbade you from doing things with the source code. Like, you couldn't make a build and give it to someone. You couldn't fork the code. You couldn't even distribute the code, right? Like, so you could look at the code and you could contribute to the code in their repository, but you were not supposed to do anything else with it. Now, this was a problem because the terms of service at GitHub, where they hosted the code, specifically said that if you had a public repository, it had to allow forking. So what did they do? Well, the developers of Winamp released an updated version of the Winamp Collaborative License, version 1.0.1, that allowed you to fork it. You just couldn't do anything with the Winamp source code that you forked. Like, you could click the fork button on Winamp, on the Winamp repository, but you couldn't do anything else with it. A very bizarre license. It was very, very strange. Lots and lots of brouhaha. But there were other issues with the source code beyond just the strange licensing. To start with, there was bits and pieces of GPL'd source code inside the license and inside the repository, and it was structured such that most, not all, but most of Winamp would therefore, by the nature of the GPL, need to be released as under the GPL license, right? Which was in direct contrast to the Winamp Collaborative License, which didn't allow you to do like anything with the source code. This was a problem. There were other issues as well, including some non-open source bits of code that were in there from both Microsoft and Intel. That was going to be a licensing issue. I don't know how much Microsoft or Intel cared. They didn't make any public statements about it. No one I reached out to at either company even really knew about this. Like, they didn't really seem to care all that much as far as I could tell, but it was worth noting. And then there was the fact that there was some code in there that was originally developed by Nullsoft and AOL, the original developers of Winamp, that the current owners of Winamp did not currently own. Specifically, I'm talking about Shoutcast. So how this happened is a guy named Justin Frankel created Winamp. He created that under the company called Nullsoft, which was a play on Microsoft because it's Nullsoft, right? Nullsoft then sold itself to AOL, right, for a ton of money. It was like a couple $100 million. Big deal back when it happened. In that time, now a company called the Llama Group, which I believe is out of Belgium, somewhere in the EU, has acquired Winamp. They did not, however, acquire something called Shoutcast. Shoutcast was also created by that same team of Winamp developers and Justin Frankel. It was an MP3 audio streaming server. That's owned by a separate company. However, a part, not all, but a part of the Shoutcast distributed streaming server was located inside the Winamp source code, right? And they did not have the rights to release that. So the source code repository for Winamp was a bit of a mess, was a big bowl of uh-oh. And clearly something had to happen. Now, I and several other journalists have had reached out to Llama Group over the last couple of weeks to talk about some of these issues. I never heard back. I've talked to other journalists who have reached out. They never heard back. I've now seen reporting from Ars Technica, the Register, and a few other places. They never heard back. No one seems to be hearing back from the Llama Group, right? They're tight-lipped as tight-lipped can be. Over the last couple of weeks, the Llama Group has also been deleting content from their Twitter account, right? They initially had quite a few announcements and posts championing the open sourcing of Winamp. Most of those have been deleted. There's one or two remaining, but most of them are gone now. However, their GitHub repository is completely nuked. This is the page you get when you go to the Winamp desktop repository on GitHub 404. The page this is not the web page you are looking for. Here is, by the way, the list of forks, which is funny to note that the list of forks is again gone, deleted 404 because the entire repository has been nuked. However, Winamp, which expressly forbade forking in the initial release, and it forbade you from doing anything if you did fork it later on, had over 2,500 forks last time I checked. I haven't checked in a couple of days because there was not much going on and the forking seemed to have slowed down. But it had over 2,500 last time I checked. It's impossible to fully check that out now because it's gone. Here is the account for the Winamp desktop. They have, and it says straight up, this organization has no public repositories. They also have no people or projects associated with this account. It's just nuked. Now, the question is, what caused this? Was this an intentional nuking? Did Llamasoft delete it? Because, I mean, things weren't going great with the open sourcing of Winamp. Was this always the plan to open source it, get a bunch of press, and then delete it, and then focus on everything else? I don't know. Is this an accident, right? After everything that went horribly awry, I mean, let's be honest. They put out a poorly thought out license. They updated that license in a poorly thought out way. They accidentally included source code from both Intel and Microsoft that they weren't supposed to release. They accidentally included GPL source code, which means that the previous Winamp, there's a good legal argument that a large portion of it now needs to be released under the GPL license. And they accidentally released Shoutcast source code that they don't even own. That's owned by a separate company now. So it's not unreasonable to think that someone did this accidentally. I know that sounds crazy. I know it does, because how do you accidentally delete this much? Well, I mean, how do you accidentally do all the stuff that they accidentally did, right? So maybe, I mean, here's the thing. Neither me nor any other tech journalist has heard anything from Llamasoft, or from Llama Group. Sorry. Nothing. Not a peep. Not a word. We don't know if this was intentional or unintentional. We don't know if they were forced to do this or they did this by choice. We don't know if it was done by choice. Did they plan to do this, or was this a last minute thing, or like what is going on here? Now, if you look around, I'm going to bring this up here. If you go to winamp.com, they still have a page up that says you can become a legacy player developer, and you can click on their GitHub page. Now, they've deleted a lot of things. I'm going to be clear about this. It looks like they've deleted at least one press release regarding this. It looks as though they've deleted some tweets regarding the open source Winamp source code, but they haven't deleted all of them. They've clearly intentionally left some of them in place, including this page, winamp.com/player/legacy, where it has a button that allows you to join the GitHub, which brings you to 404. This is not the webpage you are looking for on GitHub. So I don't know. I honestly can't tell you if this was intentional, but they're running for the hills because the reception was so bad. I can't tell you if this was Microsoft or Intel or the current owner of Shoutcast coming after them because they posted some source code and now there's legal stuff going on in the background. Maybe. I mean, that's reasonable. I can't tell you if this is in relation to the fact that there was some GPL code. Maybe. I don't know. But it is wild that this is happening. I felt like this needed a follow-up because this is just too bizarre for words. It's unfortunate that this is happening. I mean, realistically, Winamp is a historically significant piece of Windows software. It is the granddaddy of MP3 players. It was it wasn't the first, but it was like the first really successful real-time MP3 player for Windows. I think it was the second one that was released. And it was so immensely popular that preserving it from a computer archaeology perspective is, I think, critically important. Now, there's so many ways to play music files nowadays, including MP3s. There's so many millions of ways to easily make an MP3 player. Does modifying the source code to Winamp nowadays really mean all that much? Does it really accomplish all that much when there are so many alternatives? Probably not. Probably not from an everyday practical, I'm going to listen to music sort of standpoint. But from an archaeology standpoint, this is important. And the fact that they released the code in a way that appeared to intentionally prohibit people from distributing the code, right? They specifically called out only the maintainers of the official repository are allowed to distribute the software and its modifications. And they specifically forbade to distribute modified versions of the software, including the source code and the binaries. That's horribly restrictive from a computer archaeology standpoint. However, if they're just abandoning it and it's now the source code is out there. I mean, here, let me show you here. Here is one such fork. There are 2,500 plus some odd forks of Winamp on GitHub right now. Now, you can't go to them and find a list anymore because the original parent repository has been nuked, but this exists. It is there, and you can find all the source code. So, I mean, we've got that going for us. Now, one additional tidbit that I want to point out, and I think this is just kind of interesting, and not related to why it's gone right now, but the original developer of Winamp, Justin Frankel, actually spoke out on this. Someone asked, he has a website called askjf.com, Ask Justin Frankel, where you can ask him whatever question you want, and he will supposedly answer it. Someone posted the following question to him back when the day that the Winamp source code came out. Now that Winamp source has been officially released, do you have any desire to hack new badass features in? Justin replied, if I did have any desire, it would be extinguished by the license terms lol. The terms are completely absurd in the way they are written. For example, you may not create, maintain, or distribute a forked version of the software, so arguably making any changes would be considered creating a forked version. But even taking these terms as they are likely intended, which is slightly more permissive than how they are written, they are terrible. No thank you. So that's from the original Winamp developer. I thought that was kind of interesting in a way. So there you have it. Did the Llama group delete the Winamp source code? What, 3.5 weeks, 3 weeks, something like that after they released the source code? Maybe, we don't know. We don't know. Some of the web pages are deleted. Some of the press releases are deleted. Some of the tweets are deleted. The entire GitHub repository is deleted. But some tidbits are still there. So we'll find out. We'll find out in the coming days. Oh, and with that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, nerds and nerdettes across the inner tubes, I do declare, end broadcast.